Hello and welcome back to another episode of Boys Gone Wild. I don't like introducing it like that anymore. I don't know, how do you introduce things? Hello and welcome to another episode of Boys Gone Wild. It just feels, hi? You can't be like, what, wagwan my G's? No, that's culturally insensitive. Anyway, wagwan my G's and welcome to another. I think that would be an incredible opening to Boys Gone Wild. If every time I'm like, wagwan my G's. God, yeah, it would be amazing to look at the analytics of the amount of people who quit after the first 10 seconds of the video. Wagwan my G's, no thank you, not listening to that white man, thank you very much. I'm going to pick a different white man to listen to, because there are many to choose from. But yes, this episode is another solo one. I've been, with these solo ones, they're kind of bonus episodes where I hope to talk about specific Boys Gone Wild when I have time. And I've been wanting to basically talk about, the last solo episode I did was about Ching Heist, the performance artist. This one's about Patrice O'Neal. And then I've got another one I want to do on Woody Allen, but it's about when I can find the time. So, yeah, this one is, I decided that it would be good to do an episode on Patrice O'Neal, one of my favourite stand-ups, after I saw the new documentary made by Comedy Central about Patrice O'Neal's life. And I watched it couple of weeks ago, but didn't get round to making this episode till now. But yeah, after watching the Patrice O'Neal thing, which it was a nightmare to find, I had to find it because it was only on in America. I had to stream it illegally, and I don't know if I haven't been explained right, but it is. Why can't you watch stuff online? Why isn't there? I would have paid for it. Why can I not see it in the UK? Why do I have to commit a crime to watch a show? What is the thinking for people who made the show that they're not going to let people in the UK see it till later? I would give money to them. Instead, you force me to steal. Okay? I stole from you. And I don't feel guilty about it because if I can't pay for it, it's my right to steal. I think that's the rule of the internet. If you don't give us options to pay for shit, we will take it, okay? And you should be terrified of us. Yeah, it really annoys me. And if you're trying to look for a film, how are we in 2021 and not every single film you can buy in high quality on the internet? I don't particularly like streaming films. I want to say for ethical reasons, but in general it's because I don't like the high resolution. I don't like the low resolution and the glitchiness, and having to HDMI up to my TV. Not a fan of that. And also the ethicalness. Even though it's not unethical if everyone who made the film's dead, then steal away. You know, I think that's public. Once everyone in a film dies, that's your property. And if you watch a film from the 30s, even if there's a baby in it, it's weird when you watch films from the 30s because it's just weird thinking everyone died, you know? You see, if you look at a scene from a film from the 30s, the 40s, and there's like this nice, cute little baby, that baby's dead now. Weird, isn't it? The person holding the sound, boom, dead. Cameraman, dead. Guy who did the lighting, all dead, massacred. But yeah, whenever I'm trying to watch a film, and there's, when you can go these sites that tell you where things are streaming, and when it says it's literally not streaming anywhere, what is the point? Why are there not always, for any film, options to buy it? I was trying to watch In the Mood for Love, a Wong Kar-wai film. Couldn't find it anywhere. Nowhere to buy. And I also read some trivia. The film site Mubi, was set up by these Turkish guys because they couldn't find the film In the Mood for Love. Mubi is a sort of art house curation film website where you sign up and you could, for like £7 a month, you can have they choose great films for you to watch. That was set up because the guys couldn't find the film In the Mood for Love. I still can't find the film In the Mood for Love. I had to steal it, and I will do unless you make it on offer. But anyway, this is not about In the Mood for Love. This is about Patrice O'Neal and the documentary about him, and it was a good doc. It was an emotional doc because he's had quite a he had quite a tragic end, dying from his lifelong diabetes. And it was made by a lot of his generation of comedians, people like Bill Burr, Bob Kelly, Jim Norton, these kind of people from who came up with him in his generation, just talking about his life. And it felt very genuine of people who really had held a place in their heart for him, talking about it. And I was just glad that his life, that for people who aren't massive comedy fans, not a lot of people know Patrice O'Neal, because his approach to the industry was so abrasive and self-destructive. He rarely got the mainstream recognition he deserved. So Patrice is generally considered one of the great stand-ups of all time by comedians. He's certainly a cool thing to say. I'm not saying that undermines his greatness, but he certainly, because he died young, he certainly is it's a cool thing to think Patrice O'Neal's the best stand-up of all time. It says something about you. And you never know with people who died. Bill Hicks, I think he only managed to put out 2 specials before he died. Patrice O'Neal only managed to put out 1 special before he died. And these kind of people who, if they die early, they become sort of mythologized. Is that the word? Yeah. Eminem, I bet he wished he'd died. Do you know what I mean? Like, fucking hell. Tupac and Biggie, died so young. They put out 3 albums each. Died. Hip-hop heads. So cool to say Tupac and Biggie, best of all time. Eminem, if he'd died after his 4th album, probably before Relapse. Yeah. Maybe after. If he died he'd made 4 great albums. If he got shot after that 4th one, I guarantee people would say he's the greatest rapper of all time. No question about it. But because no one had the charity, the thought, the mercy to kill Eminem, they allowed him to carry on making music. Patrice came up in what I think is one of the golden ages of comedy, which is sort of he came up in the New York scene, even though he's from Boston, seemingly the best comics are. He came up from Boston to New York in the 90s, early noughties. That seemed to me, for American comedy this is, to be where there was something really special happening with stand-up. That's Louis C.K., that's Bill Burr, Colin Quinn, Patrice O'Neal. And what made Patrice so good was that he sort of practiced this truly radical honesty. The documentary is called Killing is Easy because it's a quote from him saying, basically, destroying a club, doing really well, that's easy. Saying what you want to talk about and not caring what people think, that's hard. That's his sort of approach. And it's not saying that he would kill every time, but he would always do everything on his terms. And he certainly is inspirational to people and me as a comedian because he lived his life fully with doing pure authenticity, especially in American comedy, probably more than British comedy. The kind of drive is to try and find authenticity, and the sort of your journey as a stand-up comedian is trying to find who you are, and that's the kind of dual journey you're trying to make as you get close. And the great stand-ups is about fully realizing who you are and channeling that with no bullshit. That's why stand-up comedy's been doing so well. It's because with the world being so confusing, having people who can go on stage and truly channel themselves unapologetically is very appealing. And he probably did that more than anyone ever has since. You may not like his stuff, which is very on the nose, very potentially offensive. His whole obsession seemed to be about morality and truth, which I think a lot of great comedy should be. And how why his stuff is so funny is because he would just think about what is something that we all morally think openly, but internally think the opposite. And he'll bring that out of you. And you can't help but laugh because it reveals the guilt you have of the kind of how you present yourself to the world and what you actually think. There's a lot of things I didn't agree with him on. He talked a lot about the dynamics of men and women, and that wasn't true to me, some of the stuff he said, but that doesn't really matter, which I wish people could sort of view comedy as it's not being matter if it's true to you. If it's true to the person on stage, if they're expressing truth, then it has value. The way that he discussed men and women as a black American from, who's like 30, 40 years older than me, that doesn't apply to me in my world. It doesn't ring fully true. There's some truths, essential truths about the dynamics between men and women, but on the whole, I didn't fully agree with some of the stuff he said. Doesn't matter. I don't make it matter because he was so funny and he was so honest and so true to himself. He was so true to himself that he fucked his career, because he never for a second did anything that he felt was inauthentic. But kind of the reason why I wanted to talk about Patrice, though his special Elephant in the Room is one of the best specials of all time, and I highly recommend you watch it. And the routine in it about White Baby on a Keychain, which you can find on YouTube, which is about how long the police look for white women compared to black women.
You can tell how pretty a white woman is? The value, you look at her and then you wonder how long they would look for if she was missing. I saw you look mad, sweetie. How long, if you was missing, how long you think they were? Exactly. She went. You know what I mean? We know the girl that he supposedly had, what's the girl in Aruba? Natalie Holloway, right? But the one, he just killed a girl in Peru. What's her name? Exactly.
It is one of the greatest stand-up routines of all time, in my opinion. And the way that he one of the best comments on race, and there's so many comedians doing things about race that seem so nauseating and moralizing, but his way of sort of showing the worst of himself and then discussing societal issues meant that it doesn't feel this sort of patronizing thing. It just feels like pure truth. But I guess the reason why this is a lot of preamble about how much I like Patrice O'Neal as a comedian is because I don't want it to get misconstrued that I am a huge fan. I guess watching the documentary, it made me feel this whole episode should be really about a realization I had about how comedy is sort of becoming presented, and something that I'm not a huge fan of, which is this sort of deification of comedy. And this sort of, it was just interesting in the documentary how it would cut to these, Bob Kelly, Bill Burr, it would cut to these great comedians talking about Patrice, and they'd be like, he was one of the great truth tellers, he was a free speech warrior, he was like, and they would talk about him like he's this sort of like extraordinary spiritual leader, and then it will cut to a clip of him doing stand-up, and it would be like, you ever been with a girl and her pussy smells like fish, or something like that. It would be something unbelievably crash. He changed the way we looked at the world. Hey, you ever tickled a girl's asshole and she farted in your face? It's like sometimes it got grating the way that they discuss Patrice as this sort of, as if he was Moses coming down from the mountain, as if he's this prophet, and what he has to say is a lot about smelly vaginas, and it kind of reminded me of a point that I feel about comedy and the way we talk about comedy is how on Joe Rogan and things like this, which is where it sort of started, there's endless amounts of comedians talking about comedy and how comedy is this sacred art that is the last bastion of free speech and should be treated as this great thing, and the kind of deifying comedians as these sort of gods. And I guess, to be honest, because I am a huge comedy fan and because I do comedy, I know that is sort of true. I do think it's a great art form. I do think it's only going to get more important. Think old art forms like theatre and stuff, they're dying. And stand-up, which is not even considered an art form by the government, is only getting bigger, and because it's cheap, it's affordable, it feels relevant, it feels it can deal with today's problems better than other art forms. I do believe all these things about art, but I also believe that we should stop talking about it. And I do feel comedy as this great art form should be almost a secret among comedians, because I find that endless sort of self-congratulation that happens around comedy, and I'm not sure how Patrice would even feel about the documentary that was sort of deifying him. I don't know how he'd feel, but even though it was very touchingly done in many ways, and it was a tribute to a friend by other friends, and I did enjoy it very much. I'm not fully criticising it, but it did embody some of the ways that we've started talking about comedy and sort of basically trying to lift it up to this thing that it's not. Because I think comedy is one of the most important art forms, but I don't want to talk about how important it is, because it should be treated as low art, because it belongs in the gutter, because that's what comedy is. It's a gutter art form. It shouldn't be treated as high art, because it's not high art. It doesn't mean it's less important than high art, but it needs to know its place, which is comedy clubs happen in basements. Disgusting. Top Secret Comedy Club, one of the best comedy clubs in this country, it's a fucking shithole, and that's how it should be, you know? You'd be terrified taking kids there, because it's like, it literally, it looks like, I think Sean McLaughlin said it feels like you've licked a battery and gone insane. It's an abandoned laser quest. You know, it's hard to think of a great art form. The greatest place to do a great art form in the country is an abandoned laser tag. But that's what it is. It is essentially a low art form, and it should be treated as thus. And though I think it can do all the things that Joe Rogan and all the comedians you get on endlessly talk about how it's like we're the last truth tellers and stuff, part of me thinks that's sort of true, but that's not for everyone to know. And it's certainly more of a problem in America. But the way that sort of, I don't like the way that comedians are getting filled with this sort of arrogance that they're like preachers or truth tellers, even though they are. A lot of them are. Some of them aren't, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to be this truth teller. You can just be funny. That's the most important thing. But those some comedians truly are people who spread thought-provoking messages. The way that they've started carrying themselves as these sort of untouchable, deified beings is sort of against how I view comedy, is that comedians should be treated as the scum jesters that they are. They are prostitutes. That's what they are. They're low down, and that's why they have potentially valuable things to say about society, because they're gutter scum, you know, and they should be spat on in the street, not deified as gods. And even Dave Chappelle, who's one of my favourite comedians of all time, truly one of the greatest stand-ups. You know, his special Bird Revelations is up there with Elephant in the Room as one of my favourite specials of all time. It's on Netflix. You should definitely watch it if you haven't. But recent Dave Chappelle, I found with the last kind of the things he's been posting, I find his sort of, he feels like he believes his hype too much now. And I don't know if that's unfair to say. And this is not saying I'm not a fan of Dave Chappelle. I still think he's one of the greats of all time. But there is a sort of, he does mic drops at the end of his sets. No comedian should ever do a mic drop. Certainly, and maybe this is coming from a British comedy angle, where the idea of sincerely dropping a mic as if you're a fucking rapper at the end of a comedy set makes my stomach turn. The amount of times you've seen Dave Chappelle drop the mic, like, boom. To me, I'm like, that's so far removed from what a comedy should be about and what comedians are. And, you know. But, you know, he is still one of the greats, and he there's a great set of his online, which is 3 hours and 45 minutes. It's on this shitty club camera. He dropped into a comedy club in New York and just stayed talking for 3 hours 45 minutes. It's all recorded, and like I know there's no other comedian who could probably be as enthralling as him over 3 hours 45 minutes. So he is a great stand-up. He is a great preacher. He does tell stories and reveal truths and all. But he should. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I just feel like, even though I know that's the case, you should pretend it isn't, because your role isn't that. Your role is preaching under the guise of being a prostitute or a gutter scum jester. I just think watching that documentary on Patrice and just seeing the way that we talk about comedy, I feel sometimes it needs to be more self-aware of the fact that it is low art. But then it also reminded me of kind of how I got into comedy and the kind of interesting conversation we're having about morality in comedy and the way that like a lot of Patrice O'Neal stuff now wouldn't be considered okay. And some of that's fine, and some of that isn't fine. You know, I think some views are outdated and that's okay, but then some truths are too hard to hear and that's not okay. But how I got into Patrice is through, and I have a kind of a tough relationship with this, but how I sort of got into a lot of American stand-ups was through the Opie and Anthony show, which Patrice O'Neal featured on regularly. And the Opie and Anthony show was sort of like these two shock jocks of the late 90s, early noughties, was where they kind of burst onto the scene of these two, Opie and Anthony, these two American radio who would just do the most shocking things. You know, they'd just be like a mixture of kind of the Wolf of Wall Street anarchy with just kind of like bro humor, but like pushing the boundaries of what radio could be, constantly getting fired, very controversial. Both utterly despicable human beings. One, Anthony, is a racist. He's a Trump supporter, which I don't think necessarily makes you a racist, but he also is a racist. You listen to some of the things. He's racist, scumbag. And then Opie, who I don't think is a racist, but he's just not funny at all. And just a bit gross and perverted and creepy. So you got those two kind of gross guys who listen back to them. It is disgusting. Not disgusting, but just very unappealing. But then they had a radio show in New York where they would just get on the funniest comedians, and the funniest comedians were allowed to say whatever they want. And it still is probably, at times, the funniest show I've ever heard. Because even though those two guys are kind of gross and scummy, and a lot of comedians they go on were kind of gross, and it was during a period of comedy where it was kind of gross, sweaty men leering over women. That being said, it was also the funniest stuff I think I've ever heard in many ways. It was at a time where Louis C.K. was coming up, Bill Burr was coming up, Patrice O'Neal was coming up, and they'd all come into the studio and Opie and Anthony, and they would just beat their mind, and it was fucking hilarious. And it's weird because though morally, in an argument, you could argue there's something very immoral about Opie and Anthony and about some of the things they said. Trying to marry that with the fact that it makes me laugh more than anything I'd heard before, you know, is sort of where a key question about comedy lies, and something that I think lies with Patrice O'Neal's whole career, which is he's saying things that aren't technically right, but if they make you laugh, which is a really hard reaction to suppress. When you find something funny, you find something funny. It's hard to pretend otherwise. What does that mean? What does that mean about you? What does that mean about the comedy? So yeah, I think there was something genius about that show and something awful about that show, and the mixture of that is what made it brilliant. But yeah, listen to some of Patrice O'Neal and Louis C.K.'s clips on Opie and Anthony. It is brilliant. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on Patrice. I think I've covered everything I wanted to. I hope I was fairly... I don't fully know what point I was trying to make, but I guess I just wanted to... I think after watching that documentary, I kind of felt there was like a reoccurring thing that I was noticing in comedy that I don't feel... I could be wrong, but I just notice more in American comedy, and I hope it doesn't come over to Britain, is not treating comedians as the scum we are. You know, and I hope, you know, no matter if and I hope it is important, you know, as a comedian to remember your place at the bottom of society where you belong. So yeah. Peace out.